All right, we will go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone to the fourth of ASA's Data Leadership Webinar Series. We've had quite the year with these 4 webinars. We've really enjoyed meeting with those of you who are repeat customers with us. Thank you so much. Today, we're going to be exploring data inquiry into instructional leadership. And for many of us, that'll be exploring our own practices right into what we do. This session, by the way, is being recorded. We'll be spending the morning together until around 11 o'clock. You're going to have additional opportunity to check in with us in a follow-up session on March 17th. And we would love to hear from you during a follow-up session. And it is an open session. You can ask questions about anything that you think we could help you with. We would love to meet with you. Make sure you have accessed these slides. They were sent to you this morning, I think. And you can also see the link here on this slide. And there are many links, by the way, embedded in the slides. So you'll want to have the slides open as we go forward. So here we are a team. And we are the WISExplore team. And I'm going to introduce them. I asked them to give us a wave. We have Jim Lee from CISA 12. Hey, Jim. We have Marianne Hujak from CISA 6. Hey, Marianne. Lisa Arneson from CISA 3. And Wendy Savasky from DPI. Thank you for joining us. And I do think there might be someone else from DPI I saw on the list too. So 1 or 2 people. So welcome to everyone that's participating today. So about this webinar, this has been a partnership with ASA that we really appreciate. Again, this is the 4th session. The previous 3 that you see listed here have all been recorded and available through ASA if you should want to seek any of the materials used in those sessions. We are, as I mentioned earlier, having a follow-up session, open office hours for any of you that would like to connect with us. You're welcome to do that. So our outcomes for today, the first 4 here are kind of the heart of what we're going to be engaging in. First, talking about what is instructional leadership, how do we define it, what are the strategies that show instructional leadership, then how do we collect evidence on that. We're going to be discussing what kind of evidence sources we would use. And then we want to talk also about what would be a process for inquiry that we might use. And then we have an actual brand new tool, a self-assessment into instructional leadership that we really want you to have some hands-on time with today. We also have extension activities that you can use following the webinar. This is a short session till 11 o'clock. You can continue to conduct your own data inquiry. You can learn about the data inquiry journal or engage in a root cause analysis. And we will give you links to those activities later on. So first we want to know who's with us today. We're going to use kind of the Brady Bunch format here. So you might want to put your view on gallery view so you can see us. And please, you're going to be turning on your video image when I call on your role. So I'm going to stop the screen share here. And so we can concentrate on who's here. Excuse me, here trying to get set up. So first, turn your video off, and then when I call on your role, would you turn your video on and your audio and tell us, you know, just say hi to everyone if you would. So is there anyone here that's a district administrator? A district administrator. Open up your video and say hi to everybody if you would. Any district administrators?
Meaning working at the district office or superintendent?
Sure,
like people?
that works.
Okay.
Hi,
So,
Amy. And where are you from?
I'm Waukesha.
Waukesha, welcome.
Thank you.
School principals, please open up your video and say hi to everyone.
Hi, I'm Nick. I'm a director of teaching and learning at St. Grace Central School District.
Awesome, welcome. And Kate.
Hello, I'm Kate. I am a brand new principal at Peshtigo Elementary Learning Center.
Great, welcome. Jeff.
Hi, Jeff Domerow, principal at Grant Elementary with the School District of Marshfield.
Welcome. Okay, any other principals that I missed? All right, and assistant principals, any here? Curriculum instruction, I think we did hear from Ryan. You're here. Do you want to say hi?
Hi, Ryan Arata, School District of Candon. Shout out to Mr. Domro. I'm pretty sure he's from Merrill too at one point. So good morning, everybody.
Good morning. Glad to have you here. Teachers, any classroom teachers here with us today? Pupil services, anybody representing special education or pupil services? And how about representing CISA? And we have a group of CISA people. Kristen, are you there? And how about DPI? Hey gang, great to see you. Great to have you join us today. Wonderful. All right, we're going to move forward here. And we do have a note-taking template for you today. It's on slide 6. There is a link. Let me get my screen share back up. And you can, this is for you. So as we move through different topics, we wanted to give a space for you to just grab your own reflections and jot them down and think about, because you're leaders, how will you bring this back and collaborate with others around this issue, this topic, this content? And then if any actions come to mind, you might also note those. So this is for you. So the link is on the slides. You'll want to make a copy for yourself and put it in your own Google Drive. And moving forward here, there's an inquiry process that we advocate, strongly advocate. We've been using with many folks out there across the state of Wisconsin, and want to kind of talk through what these steps are and these phases. So first of all, the topic for today is instructional leadership, and how in the world do we conduct inquiry into that? Well, we have to begin with definitions and a clear focus. And today it's going to be about defining instructional leadership. We also, in any inquiry process, we strongly urge that it be a collaborative process so that together as a team, you agree on the purpose, the principles, and the methods that you're going to use. Also, what should be agreed upon by that collaborative team are the data sources that are going to be used as you conduct inquiry. And you know, it's tricky when we get into practices like instructional leadership. You know, what do those sources look like? And the green ring that you see there up at the top really represents the 4 core steps that we follow when we're actually in the heart of inquiry. We begin with questioning key questions that guide our inquiry. And in this case, they're going to be questions about instructional leadership. The actual investigation then, using our data sources and analyzing, pulling, collecting, and analyzing the data and interpreting our findings, clarifying what we see there, and then proposing objectives and improvements and actions that we might embed in our own professional practice goals, maybe even in our school improvement goals. So this is a process that we're not going to spend time on all the nuances of this process today, but we want you to be aware of it. We also want you to be aware that every CISA in Wisconsin has a trained data specialist that's an expert in this process. This is the green ring, the practice data inquiry process, also the red ring, which you may have seen before, which is the student data inquiry process, and also the third phase, which is school improvement planning. The data specialists are all trained in all steps of the process. So to begin today, we want to get you talking. So we want to know what you think. When you think of instructional leadership, and we know you are a plate spinner, you are spinning a lot of plates as a leader. There are a lot of things that you do, multiple roles that you hold. We want you today to think specifically about your role as an instructional leader. And we'd like you to connect with others about how you define it. So we're going to actually send you into breakout rooms for this discussion. And we want you to think about how how do you see it as an instructional leader? And in particular, how has this shifted during COVID? Because it's a different time, and did it impact your instructional leadership? And we want you to get to know each other too. So we're going to move you into breakout rooms so you can chat. So I'll let you think about that a bit as I get set up here for breakout rooms. All right. right. And here we go. And we're just going to have, 5 to 7 minutes or so to chat, and we'll bring you back. And you'll get a warning, about a 60-second warning for that. Here we go. Welcome back, everyone. I hope you got to chat a little bit and just begin this conversation about instructional leadership. And we're going to go forward and get much deeper in what we're really talking about here. So I'm going to turn it over to Marianne Hujak to take us into how do we define instructional leadership. Marianne?
Thank you, Judy. And I hope that all of you had a great conversation in your breakout room, and we hope that we can make time for more conversation today, as we've heard from many of you that have attended multiple ones of our sessions that is time that you look forward to. So let's get into our content for today. We know that evidence shows that schools with instructional leadership outperform those that don't have that. So let's start by defining instructional leadership for today. So the purpose of instructional leadership is to improve the effectiveness of teachers and in turn improve student learning for all students. I know in our section we talked about how that learning is so important to focus on each of our students. So equity is really what we're talking about here, right? That's an important, very important component of all aspects of education. And so we must embed that into our practices every day, from leadership to curriculum to policies and practices, including our instructional practices. So there are many experts in the educational field who have researched and written about instructional leadership. And on this slide, you'll see a few quotes and information that those leaders have shared in terms of a definition for instructional leadership. Because we have such limited time today, we are going to just take a look at a very narrow scope of instructional leadership. And so I want to, kind of zero us in a little bit on our focus for today. So as you all know, there are 10 standards for educational leaders that describe professional behaviors. So today, again, we're going to just focus on standard 4 and really parts of standard 4, but standard 4 is really our primary focus. So I don't know, I'll read through the effective leader characteristics here in case your screen is so small. I know this is a lot of information here. So, but read along if you have access to the slides as well. And think about, as we're reading through these quickly, think about what % of your time each week do you spend on standard 4, on these activities. So effective leaders, and I'm going to have to move my screen around here a little bit too. Effective leaders implement coherent systems of curriculum, instruction, and assessment that promote the mission, vision, and core values of the school, embody high expectations for student learning, align with academic standards, and are culturally responsive. Effective leaders align and focus systems of curriculum, instruction, and assessment within and across grade levels to promote student academic success, love of learning, the identities and habits of learners, and healthy sense of self. Effective leaders promote instructional practice that is consistent with knowledge of child learning and development, effective pedagogy, and the needs of each student. Effective leaders ensure instructional practice that is intellectually challenging, authentic to student experiences, recognizes student strengths, and is differentiated and personalized. Effective leaders promote an effective use of technology in the service of teaching and learning. Effective leaders employ valid assessments that are consistent with knowledge of child learning and development and technical standards of measurement. Effective leaders use assessment data appropriately and within technical limitations to monitor student progress and improve instruction. So again, we would like you to think about those pieces and, as best you can, right, estimate what % of time do you spend doing these things each week. So your week in general, about how much time do you spend? And if you want to just pop that in the chat, we'll do a quick little chat blizzard here. And we really wanted to do that introduction to kind of know each person's role, because if you remember what their roles were this May, right, this percentage may be different depending on your role. Well, thank you to those who shared. And that's great. Like if you're a curriculum director, right, this is your job every day. And if you're a principal, this is what you love to do. Not always do you get to do all of these things, right? Other things get in the way. I know in our breakout session, we talked about how actually during the pandemic, the student discipline needs have been less, and how great is that? So you can focus on some of these other things that you definitely enjoy doing much more. So Judy, if we can go on to the next slide. Thank you. So determining who is considered a leader of instruction will also determine who you should involve in the inquiry into instructional leadership. Many times assumptions are made that educational leaders are just the principals. And today's session is in partnership with the State Association of School Administrators. And so that aligns with some of your roles as well. But how we move forward today, or as we move forward today, I should say, consider who is leading instructional efforts in your school. We understand that for some of you, that is a much broader definition. And for others, it's more narrowed in focus. Sometimes we have a definition for a leader that is very different, like anyone who has influence over someone else is a leader, for example, in some districts, that's that value. And so again, that's what we mean by it might be a much broader scope. So who are the instructional leaders in your school? Again, if you want to just make a quick entry into the chat, who do you consider your instructional leaders? And the cool thing is there's no wrong answer here. Oh, I love that your students are instructional leaders. Absolutely. Thanks, Tequila. Thanks, Ryan. And when you look at the different instructional leaders, with that frame of who your instructional leaders are throughout this morning, and your conversations with colleagues today, you know, we encourage you to bring that into the conversations. Okay, building leadership team. Thanks, Tiffany. Thanks, Kathy. I think I missed one earlier too. Kate, thanks, Kate. You were too quick for me. All right, we're going to jump into some strategies, and I'm going to turn over to Lisa.
Thanks, Marianne. So we can learn more about how to define instructional leadership by looking at different approaches to it. What are some strategies that improve instructional leadership? We're going to dig into those here. First, consider educator effectiveness as both a way to improve instructional leadership and as a broader school improvement strategy. Educator effectiveness espouses an approach to instructional leadership through a learning-centered approach. This approach is based on Wisconsin's own research finding. Schools and districts who have a learning-centered approach to educator effectiveness see huge improvements in ELA and math achievement, as well as teacher retention. So we've linked a self-assessment tool on this slide under Rate Yourself for you to use later if you choose, hopefully with your team. How does your approach to EE align with the elements of a learning-centered approach defined by this research? So there are 5 components that we're looking for, and that's what's on the rating sheet, asking you to rate yourself. Do you have a foundation of trust that encourages educators to take risks and learn from mistakes? A common research-based framework on effective practice. That's kind of an automatic, but how much do you use your Danielson or your Strong or other Marzano maybe? Do you have a regular application of educator developed goals, SLOs, based on data? What about cycles of continuous improvement guided by timely and specific feedback through ongoing collaboration? And lastly, do you have integration of an evaluation processes within the existing school and district improvement strategy? So it's not a siloed activity that we do over here just to check boxes. So we know about feedback. It's essential for EE, but it's also important in a broader context, providing teachers useful and accurate feedback. So this illustration basically sums up the research findings from Wisconsin's EE study. When useful and accurate feedback is combined with providing teachers the opportunity to use that feedback they're given, it leads to improvement in both teacher practices and student outcomes. So think about that. 2 things, right? Useful, actionable, purposeful feedback, specific feedback given to teachers. And then, how and when do they have time to actually use that feedback to get better? Take a look at these powerful results. And again, I believe this study wrapped up in 2018 at the state, and we do have a link here for you to look at it yourself. But basically, we're looking at students that increase the opportunities, schools that increase the opportunities for teachers to use feedback 2 consecutive years, improve their achievement results, a combined value added of over 41 days of math and over 31 days of EL instruction. Those are instructional days. If you do the things that we've talked about so far, it's comparable to adding days of instruction to your ELA in mathematics. That's pretty powerful. Teacher retention is an issue everywhere, really, particularly in small rural schools. It's hard to recruit and retain teachers out in our rural areas. But new teachers in schools that implement EE as a learning-centered process with, again, that useful, accurate feedback, have greater trust in their principal and view them as a more effective leader. By increasing the trust teachers have with their principal, a learning-centered EE approach promotes greater teacher commitment to that school and results in greater teacher retention. The opposite is true, they found, in schools that provide less and less effective feedback. So these results suggest that EE can either promote or hinder the retention of new teachers depending on how it's implemented. So we want to give you the opportunity, again, first of all, to think about how opportunities are provided for principals, leaders, evaluators to give and use feedback with your teachers. And I would include coaches in that, right? We had some of that listed, some of you listed those. How has the feedback been going during COVID? To what extent are you giving that specific actionable feedback? And to what extent are there opportunities for your teachers to use it? You have a conversation, think about the retention rates for teachers in your school and what might be contributing to those. And how have you used feedback to support your teachers during COVID? Want to send you back into breakout rooms to have a conversation about the use of feedback as part of your instructional leadership. Use these questions to guide your discussion, and you'll have about 8 minutes or so to have this conversation. So Judy, you want to send us into breakout rooms? All right, as you're coming back, welcome back. I'm going to adjust my screen a little bit, and we will keep going here. Hopefully you had some really good discussions, and that's kind of what we want to encourage you to do. We're going to shift now and think about the notion of distributed leadership. So distributed leadership is another effective strategy for instructional leaders. Distributed leadership in schools explores the degree of involvement of staff, parents, or guardians, and students in school decisions. And I know that we've got some of that going on based on the feedback in the chat. So do you work alone? Do you delegate? Is there a leadership team helping you? How much is your leadership distributed with other educators? And how have you built capacity for your staff to fulfill leadership roles? So this slide expands on these ideas with more ideas about distributed leadership from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So you can see the graphic there that gets a little deeper into it. So I just want to give you just a second or two to look at that. All right. Have a few more things for you to consider. More strategies are shown here for your consideration. Research connections exist linking these strategies to improved student outcomes. And so here are 12 research-based instructional leadership strategies, and you can kind of glance through them. And if we go on to the next slide, we've got even more, another take on instructional leadership behaviors for your use. And this actually comes from the National Organization for Secondary School Principals. And what we'd like you to do is to really reflect on what you do. So on the list that you see here, identify the top 3 strategies you practice the most or promote among your teacher leaders. Enter your top 3 in the chat. From those responses, we're going to look at what's most common in our group today, and then also look at what's missing. So I'm going to give you a few minutes to look. And again, we want you to just enter your top 3. What do you do the most of these things? And post it in the chat. It'll be interesting for everyone to see. So Ryan's got lots of things going on here. Get in classrooms more. He stays positive. It's hard to do sometimes, and grow professionally and share. There's a lot here. We spent some time going through this activity ourselves, thinking about, gosh, there's a lot to think about here when we're picking our top 3. More of getting into classrooms, reflecting and planning with the team, coaching based on will and skill. That's phenomenal. I'm digging into that myself a little bit deeper to really get at the will versus skill. Getting classrooms, growth mindset coaching, expanding personal learning in a network format, get into classrooms, stay positive, and model. All right, I think given our time, we appreciate your participation and your posting. I think that we will go ahead and I'm going to turn it over to Jim. So Jim Lee, take it over.
Thank you. So we want to shift our thinking now more into the inquiry aspect of this. We spent a little bit of time defining it. We spent a little bit of time talking about some of the actions and behaviors that instructional leaders use throughout their day in a typical school. We want to talk and move now into how do you conduct inquiry into that. So we're going to discuss some of the ways that you might be able to gather information and data to help inform your inquiry. And we're going to set a question for you. How do you know if your instructional leadership is effective during COVID-19? One of the things about this particular aspect of it is that this journey of inquiry into effective instructional leadership can be either done maybe very personally as an individual, depending on how your school is staffed or your district is staffed, or it might be something that you would look at as a team. If you have other principals, other leaders in your school that you could work with in crafting an inquiry. So when we talk about evidence of instructional leadership, what will be your body of evidence? What will you collect? And there's a variety of different things that you could do. There could be some behavioral observations. There was one study where they used a job shadow approach, where a principal would job shadow another principal, and they had a checklist of things that they were checking off. What was being done during the day by that principal, et cetera. Where did it fall? Was it instructional leadership? Was it school management? Was it administrative duties, et cetera? You could also do a review of any artifacts of leadership team meetings and agendas to determine what's been your progress on implementing some of the instructional strategies and improvement planning for instruction that you've put into place. Does that artifact over time, do the documents over time show progress towards meeting those overall goals? Of course, there are surveys that you could use. We're going to show you a couple on the next page. The EE survey is one that provides some feedback to school leaders on instructional leadership that was being talked about by Lisa earlier on about what's the impact if you take a learner-centered approach to EE. Of course, schedules and time studies, and just to iterate something we talked about earlier today, to revisit that, time studies can be quite effective in taking a look at where is your time actually spent and what is the main purpose of, what are the main things that are taking up your time. And when you talk about instructional leadership, there's been some time studies that suggest really when you look at all the different things principals do, they spend about 5 hours a week in instructional leadership activities and behaviors. And they break that down by further defining it as coaching, developing the educational program, evaluating teachers of the curriculum, classroom walkthroughs, and then providing staff, teachers with professional development. And then there's a whole host of there's another category of other, which is the sort of the paperwork, the communications, the correspondence around doing all of those functions that I just mentioned. And so that's how they've defined their instructional leadership activities within that study. So conducting a time study can be very revealing. Of course, you can also look for feedback from teachers, supervisors, students. Some of that can be brought in by surveys, or you might want to do some types of discussion groups with leadership teams or others in your school. Then there's always reflections and self-assessments. And finally, we could take a look at student data outcomes. Are you seeing progress being made in terms of your instructional leadership in changing instructional practice for the benefit of students? Is the data supporting that is working? And that, of course, has to happen over time. It just can't happen, within a year. Sometimes it takes 3 years. Sometimes it takes 5 years to really see the impact of a shift and change in your instructional practices that you've been promoting and training teachers on. Next slide, please. So here are some sources of some tools. There's the Val-Ed, this is a leadership survey. And the call survey, some of you may have used the call survey. Vanderbilt Assessment of Leadership is got some backing on it from Marzano and Danielson. The call survey is currently being used by West Ed. These things cost money, but if you want to get feedback from teachers in your system about instructional leadership, these are some great ways to gather that information. Of course, you have WISE for districts that can help you dig into the student data aspect, is what you're doing with instructional leadership and moving the instructional program forward, actually working and finding the results that you wanted. And then again, we would suggest using the EE survey that's given by teachers and looking at those critical components of feedback and giving teachers opportunity to work on feedback to determine if you have created a learner-centered EE system as an instructional improvement strategy. Next, please. So we want to have you share some of the evidence sources that you might pull together or that you are using that could help you examine your instructional leadership happening in your school. And so we're going to put you back into the breakout rooms, and there's a link on this slide to a Jamboard. So we'd like you to just post your types of evidence. Discuss what are you using in your school. Perhaps it's nothing and you need ideas. Perhaps it's quite extensive and you could share that with others. We'd like you to take about 5 minutes to discuss and post your thinking in a Jamboard on the question, what evidence do you have that could be used to examine instructional leadership in your school? Well, thank you for your postings. As you think through this, evidence of instructional leadership that you would use to conduct your inquiry, we wanted to give you a tool that you might find useful in that process. So as usual, the WISExplore team has come up with a self-assessment of instructional leadership that you could use to help shape your thinking and begin to look at not only the topics of the inquiry, but also some of the evidence sources for that inquiry. Next slide, please. So what you're going to find is on the top of this slide, there is a self-assessment of instructional leadership. Now, we compiled this by looking at a variety of different assessment tools for instructional leadership. We borrowed from them and came up with a tool for you to use. It's divided into 10 different aspects of instructional leadership. And the sources of this are from Marzano, Reeves, and several others. So what we'd like you to do is each aspect has a description and then a set of rating indicators. Is to read through each of the rating indicators from we're not doing this to we're advancing this particular aspect in our school. Rate yourself. And then take a look at the sample indicators for each of those aspects and maybe check a box and say, yep, this is an example of a leader indicator or a teacher indicator that says that verifies the rating that I've used, whether it's not doing to advancing. And we would like you to begin with aspect number one, vision, to begin your rating of your practice. Then continue until we bring it back together. And we're going to give you some time to work on this. Not quite 20 minutes worth of time, but pretty close to it. And really get into this. Now, you may choose after you've done the first one and got sort of a feel for it that you want to hop around to some of the other aspects rather than going in order. The top of the document here has a little bookmark place, so you can move from like vision to coaching or vision to growth or what have you. So we're going to give you some time to do this and do it as individuals.
And I think, Jim, they make a copy for their own use, correct?
Yep. When you click on that link, it'll either open up as a view only, and if you do, just make a copy, rename it, place it somewhere in your drive. It might force you to make a copy and just do the same thing. So,
How much
on the
time?
slide, click on that link.
How much time, Jim?
We've got about 15 minutes here, a little bit more.
So we're going to go silent while you get a chance to really dig into this and read the items and reflect, correct?
Right.
Okay.
All right, let's bring your attention back to the slide deck here. Just a couple of comments I wanted to make here. First of all, if you took a look at the assessment at the different aspects, most of them had a descriptor with a sort of a in parentheses during COVID-19. And the way we decided to use this was there is some real differences between what might be happening with instructional leadership during COVID-19 and what would happen in a particular normal school year. We know that many schools may have taken a little bit of a hiatus on some of their improvement strategies that were directly related to instructional and professional growth plans to focus more on students' emotional and social and emotional well-being, as well as teachers. And so that was maybe the primary focus of some of your leadership activities. At the same time, we also know that the technology presented a unique challenge as well in terms of developing skills amongst faculty to really take on this blended learning environment we find ourselves all in, and learning the strategies there that would be effective in keeping students on track in their growth. So there might be a point in time where you would like to remove COVID-19 from the survey and use it as something when you get back to normal. Next slide, please. So we do really encourage you to complete the entire self-assessment if you're able, and have some additional time. But we do want to also have you reflect and really think through your own growth mindset on how you could enhance your instructional leadership in your school. And so I'm going to end this piece of the conversation here we have with you today from John Dewey. We do not learn from experience, we learn from reflecting on experience. So again, please pause and check, self-reflect, and set your intention and then act on your own instructional leadership style. With that, I think we go on to Mary Ann.
Thanks, Jim. And I hope all of you had a chance to really dig into that self-assessment. I know, I worked on it, but I went through it today during our time as well and reflected on my own role and how I do and how our agency does at meeting some of those goals. And it was very, very helpful. I made a couple of notes of actions that I know that I want to take. So let's think about what are your next steps. So we have planned several options for you to continue this work, should you choose to. We have some videos linked here. We have office hours, as Judy mentioned at the start of our session today. The office hours that we have set up are on March 17 from 1 to 3 to come back and have more conversation about this topic or other things that are related. We also want to draw your attention back to that notes template if that kind of tool is helpful for you to document some of your next steps and how you might bring this back to your district. In addition here, you'll see that we have some other resources that we would like to draw your attention to, even recommend. So first, consider spending some time with a team on investigating evidence of instructional leadership with the data sources that you identified earlier. And you can go back to the Jamboard to get some other ideas as well. There is a extension video linked here using the data inquiry journal, as that kind of provides some instructions and a place to document your inquiry work. Finally, there's also a video linked here that goes through a root cause analysis and how to conduct that. And so there's some technical support throughout that video and slides that are linked there. So in addition, we can also share that each CISA does have a data specialist that can also assist you with this work. They can coach and support you through any inquiry that you would like to embark on. So this session also, remember, has been recorded, and you'll get a link from ASA so you can share that as well. So in addition, we are going to be facilitating a full hands-on data leadership academy next year. We did these individual session, very focused webinars this year, but we will be doing a full data inquiry academy next year, 5 sessions, blended model. Some will be face-to-face, hopefully, right? And some will be virtual. And it's really important, should you choose to participate with us in that, to bring a team. Not that you can't bring it back to your district as well, but a team will help you in bringing that back to your district. So to bring a team, a data leadership team, whatever that looks like for your district or school, that is the most beneficial. We've done this for a number of years, and that is the feedback we get from the teams that have participated as well. These are proposed dates. ASA will be, confirming locations and that kind of thing. So sometimes those dates change, but check their website to register and get final dates once they're posted. So in addition, we would really love to have your feedback on today's session. And for some of you that have maybe attended more than today's session throughout this year, we would really appreciate your feedback. We have a brief survey linked here on the slides. And any thoughts about what you liked this year and would like to be included next year, or ideas for different topics to be included, things like that would be welcomed from you. In addition, there is on the next slide a link to a resource doc that has all of the resources from today's slides put in one place for your convenience. So we would encourage you to make use of that resource as well. So appreciate your feedback again. We use that, right? That's how we reflect on our session 2. And we would like to thank everyone for joining us today. And please be safe, take care, get outside as the weather now is getting warmer, which we all appreciate, I'm sure. So
we will keep the Zoom open for a few minutes. If anybody has any questions for us, or you just want to chat with us about anything at all, we'll just keep it open for a little bit.